Rest for some of the world's top diplomats. They're still working hard in Switzerland to try and secure a nuclear deal with Iran. Russia's foreign minister is on his way there too. Representatives from 6 world powers, in fact, that's the US, Britain, France, Germany, Russia and China, all there holding marathon talks ongoing in Lausanne. The deadline they set to reach a preliminary deal is just 2 days away now, 31st of March. Now, if they do reach agreement, it could end a 12-year-long bitter row. For their part, Iran's foreign minister says Tehran has already made its decision. Now the ball is in America's court.
Iran has made a decision, a political decision, to go for engagement with dignity. I believe our negotiating partners also need to make this decision. I believe they have realized that sanctions, pressure and an agreement will not go together.
Well, it's going right up to the line. Our correspondent Daniel Bushell's keeping a very close eye on developments in Switzerland for us.
The atmosphere here at the hotel where the talks are taking place certainly marks a sea change from previous years. Looking at the photos of the talks, we can tell there's been a thaw in relations. France's foreign minister said Iran has the right to a nuclear program, but not bombs. His German counterpart, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, added the goal is in sight, but we don't know if we can reach it. The EU foreign relations chief warns we've done more than ever, but still much to work on. US Secretary of State John Kerry even claims without this deal, Iran will be out of control. He said he doesn't see any alternative to an agreement and doesn't expect continued sanctions to work. He's also reportedly ready to allow Iran to run its centrifuges as long as they don't enrich uranium, which can be used for weapons. Tehran's foreign minister cast a reassuring tone, though, adding, "We've chosen to go for the deal, but there is no place for the existing crippling sanctions against his population." Russia's foreign minister is expected to fly in today ahead of the possible deal. We'll be keeping a close eye on developments throughout the day.
Yeah, as I say, it's right up to the wire. But, you know, if you look at the recent history here, the talks taking place at all were all but unthinkable just a couple of years ago. Iran's endured almost a decade of intense Western pressure to halt its uranium enrichment program, with wave after wave of sanctions crippling its economy. Then there was that. Fears of a nuclear-armed Tehran was summed up by the Israeli Prime Minister with that memorable bomb he drew. It was back in 2012 at the UN General Assembly. A year later, Iran's president got a frosty reception in New York while addressing the UN for the first time. But after that, things seemed to change. The tide turned, leading now to what we're seeing in Lausanne, a completely different picture. Barack Obama apparently phoned President Rouhani for what was the first direct conversation between the two countries' leaders in more than 30 years. Iran and the world powers agreed to meet in Geneva in 2013 when an historic interim agreement was reached. Then, apparently, they've been meeting, as we've been reporting, regularly ever since. And because of that, a number of American and EU sanctions have been suspended as a result. But, of course, another view from Israel's Prime Minister. He says the deal that's on the table with Iran would be a disaster. And it's even worse than he'd expected, he says. Benjamin Netanyahu had repeatedly warned the US against compromising with Tehran, saying it would lead to a Middle East arms race. Washington, though, has a plan to ease his concerns, as RT's been hearing from the president of the American-Iranian Council.
I believe the U.S. playing a very sophisticated game with Iran, and that is, it is trying to disarm Iran of its nuclear program to begin with. It's going to make Iran make commitments to a nuclear deal and then walk away from its own commitment and impose on Iran other demands. So I think what the U.S. is telling Israelis and Saudis is that, listen, wait until I get this deal, and then you will see what happens thereafter. And I'm not sure if that thereafter is at all good for Iran.